As I traveled further south by train to Wuhan, it got even hotter. Malls, office buildings, and buses all had the air conditioning blasting. Sure, it felt refreshing when I first walked into an air-conditioned room, but stepping outside again was like walking into a furnace. The humid heat was unbearable, worse than what I've experienced in India. Wearing just a short-sleeved shirt, I was drenched in sweat within 5 minutes of being outside. Second, before passing through customs at the airport, we had to get a health code. This required using a WeChat account or a local phone number, but since it was my first time back in 4 years, I didn't have a Chinese SIM card anymore. The Wi-Fi at Beijing Airport wasn't working those days, so it took me 40 minutes of fumbling with a new SIM card just to get the health code. Fortunately, the health code requirement for entry and exit has since been scrapped. Third, in China, you can't access Google or WhatsApp, so I had to rely on a VPN to stay in touch with my classmates and colleagues abroad. But the VPN wasn't always reliable, and some even had daily time limits. If you exceeded them, you had to pay for a premium account. Plus, I often needed to use ChatGPT for coding work, but even with a VPN, ChatGPT wouldn't always work. It's incredibly frustrating. I mean, we're in the 2020s, and the country still feels closed off. If Chinese people need to be controlled, does that mean Irish people don't? Fourth, while it's easy enough to adjust to the time zone difference, your body's internal clock takes weeks to fully adapt. For weeks after I returned to China, I couldn't fall asleep until 3 or 5 a.m., and I couldn't get up during the day. To have remote meetings with colleagues in Europe, I had to stay up until midnight, day after day. It was exhausting. Fifth, although people in China are very hardworking, they generally lack confidence. It's so difficult for people to encourage each other in China. In Dream of the Red Chamber, no matter what Jia Baoyu did, his father always treated him as if he'd committed a huge mistake, never smiling and always using a strict, punitive approach. And most of the cleaners and security guards in China are middle-aged or elderly. Young people seem to think doing these jobs is beneath them. They'd rather stay at home than take on such work. But in Europe, many waiters and cleaners are young, confident people. When I was in school, I worked part-time as a shop assistant, and my colleagues and customers were always polite to me. Even my boss, who knew I had started a YouTube channel, respected me enough to subscribe, even when I had only a few hundred subscribers. Sixth, there are too many scam calls, 3 to 5 a day. Some are selling stocks, some insurance, and there's even one that calls from a Philippine number, speaking in perfect Mandarin and claiming to be from the police station. I asked, why is a Chinese police station using an international number? The person confidently told me not to ask questions and just answer hers. I immediately said, thank you, thank you, thank you, and hung up right away. I didn't want to be rude. I know they're just workers trying to get by. There's a saying, unless you've suffered, don't lecture others. On a side note, during the pandemic, hackers reportedly breached the customer database of a Chinese supermarket chain in Ireland, leaking the phone numbers of tens of thousands of Chinese people in Ireland. I received no fewer than 10 scam calls claiming to be from the Chinese embassy in Ireland. I asked them, why does the Chinese embassy have a Taiwanese accent? If you're running a scam, at least do it properly and don't forget to bash the CCP. The scammer couldn't help but burst out laughing. Seventh, speaking of scams, a university friend of mine complained to me. He's now helping his dad manage a factory in a coastal province. Legitimate international transfers over 300,000 RMB often get inexplicably frozen by the bank for days. When he called to ask why, they said it was the police trying to prevent telecom fraud. He also said some local police officers act like thugs, frequently inspecting their factory's fire safety and environmental compliance. If they're unhappy, they issue fines. As Lucian said, the poor often think the country belongs to them, while the rich think the wealth belongs to them. But let's talk about something more positive. When I was back in China, I visited a retired official who's a relative of mine. During the pandemic, he was very concerned about me. When I visited his home, he asked me what my foreign friends think of China. Since he's a model CCP member, I was careful not to say anything too direct, so I asked, "Do you want to hear the truth or a respectful answer?" He said he wanted the truth. So I told him, most of my foreign classmates think that China's economic development over the past few decades has been remarkable, with impressive technological achievements and infrastructure, but there's no democracy. To my surprise, he nodded in agreement. This was last June, and a few months later, my parents told me that when this relative heard I couldn't come home for the Lunar New Year, he was very disappointed and kept saying that it was all because China lacks democracy. When I heard this, I felt really guilty. I thought to myself, if I had known he would feel this way, I wouldn't have mentioned the lack of democracy. It made him feel self-conscious. The truth is, I stayed in Ireland purely for my career development, and many of my classmates who are far more capable than I am have returned to China and are thriving. A few months later, I heard that the director passed away. Not being able to spend more time with the elderly in the family is truly the greatest sorrow of those of us who go abroad. It was early summer then, and he was cremated just 2 days after his death. I feel that cremation is a very cruel practice. Even though I know that after a person dies, the body will eventually decay, at least with burial, there's something to hold on to. If it's for the purpose of conserving farmland, I've seen cases where, after cremation, the ashes are still placed in a large coffin. The final grave is almost as big as if the person were buried. When my Indian classmates' relatives pass away, they go to the nearest Ganges River to scatter the ashes. That's real land conservation. In India, Christians and Muslims are also allowed to have burials. At least they have a choice. In Ireland, the mainstream practice is burial, but if someone wishes to be cremated, that's allowed too. In China, unless you belong to an ethnic minority, you don't have a choice. You must be cremated. To be honest, death and birth are significant matters and should not be planned by any secular government. Let what belongs to God go to God, and what belongs to Caesar go to Caesar. Finally, let's talk about something more comforting. I have a high school classmate who, after graduating from university, spent 2 years taking the civil service exam. He finally passed, even though after deducting social insurance and housing fund, his initial monthly salary was only 3,000 RMB. However, he said that even though the salary is low, and even though he has seen the various injustices in society over the years, his ideal remains to study for the rise of China and to serve the people. This spirit deeply moved me. Since the birth of the imperial examination system, it has been these small-town test takers from all over the country who, with their wisdom and effort, have contributed to the progress of the nation. Although this system elevated the emperor to the supreme throne, it also ensured a certain level of social mobility in Chinese society. This social mobility is not only a manifestation of social justice, but also the source of the nation's vitality. Even though unwritten rules pervade society, it's precisely because of those who aspire to serve the public good, who dare to speak up for the people, and who uphold moral integrity, that these unwritten rules cannot openly dominate the stage. Those seemingly dry, eight-legged essays actually articulate fairness and justice. Otherwise, how could the rule of one family or dynasty win the hearts of the people? These small-town test takers may not have prestigious backgrounds or dazzling halos, but they prove through their actions that true strength comes from inner belief and perseverance. They are the backbone of this society and the driving force of the nation's progress. Their struggles and contributions allow us to deeply understand that no matter where we are, as long as we have belief and pursuit in our hearts, ordinary people can write extraordinary chapters. Every ordinary individual silently supports the hope of this era with their persistence and effort. Their stories tell us that the meaning of life does not lie in the size of achievements, but in whether one has lived out their true value. As long as we have light in our hearts and a path beneath our feet, we will eventually shine in our own unique way amidst the ordinary. Let's salute these ordinary yet great strivers, and may everyone with dreams find their own brilliant life. Finally, please subscribe and support my channel.